The second DLC for Art Online Fractured Daydream is arriving soon, so I wanted to have a look back at the first one, A Moment in Infinity featuring Strea from SAO Hollow Fragment, or Infinity Moment if you want to be specific, featuring a couple of missions focusing on Strea's mysterious arrival in Galaxia, the Gleamice Crimson slash subspecies for the localized version, which is technically the included boss of this DLC story that was also made accessible freely in co-op missions, and of course Strea herself as a multiplayer character. And afterwards, I also want to talk about what I'd like to see improved in future DLCs based on the slight criticisms that I have here. They're really slight criticisms. So, let's start with the story, especially because that was the aspect I was most concerned about. I even made a video before the launch of the DLC talking about how Strea's overall vibe, let's say, and things that the gameverse mood attached to her kinda sorta worried me a lot coming into Fractured Daydream with a clean slate. About 20% of you were quite angry at me for that video and explicitly stated that you wanted more sexual innuendos and boob jokes, so fair enough, I guess, you do you. But in the end, I was glad to see Strea's arrival was not as the queen of over-sexualization in SAO games, but rather something actually reasonable, resembling the actual Strea. In the short story that we have received, there was not a single moment where Strea acted like an object to be gawked at. She was the loving, caring, protective character that she was introduced as all the way back in Infinity Moment, and most importantly, at the core of her character, it's that her lack of boundaries was always about being friendly. It is a natural outcome of her being a mental health counseling program, something most fans and even the writers of SAO games forgot at times to be able to use her as other demonetizable concepts in video games. Sure, she is constantly hugging Kirito throughout the story, but unlike most gamers' portrayals, none of it is purposefully done to create cringeworthy, awkward scenes. It's just Strea having no boundaries, and the best showcase of this, which is the best scene in the entire DLC for that matter if you ask me, was when Strea practically forces Quinella into cooperating in the most unaware and friendly way possible that leaves not only Kirito and others completely stumped, but Quinella is also so intrigued that she decides to just play along with the circumstances. But so much talk just for Strea's personality. You probably realized I said absolutely nothing about the actual story of the DLC itself, and well, there isn't technically much there. If you play the heroine quests in Alsatian Licorice, that is basically what you're looking at here. There is this very vague anomaly that appeared in Galaxia, which is the cause of Strea coming from a different timeline. The SAO Gameverse in this case has found herself with the main canon crew who have no knowledge about her. Carnal sends the crew to investigate, they come across Strea in the first mission, team up together, and throughout the next 4 missions, nothing of significance really happens. It all culminates in defeating the Crimson Gleam and obtaining a data fragment that Carnal presumes may be the key in reviving Nej. So yes, the story does take place before the epilogue scene of the base game, and that's pretty much everything. Overall, the story of this DLC feels like the middle portion of the main game, Art Online Fractured Daydream's main campaign. A lot of talking about what you need to do, some neat portrayals of basic character traits the crew has, but otherwise an excuse to have a total of 5 missions instead of 2. I'm also hastily adding this here after the fact because I realized I never mentioned this anywhere else, but it was very disappointing that there wasn't even a single animated cutscene in this DLC. Even the heroine quests back in Alsatian Licorice had these 30-second introduction cutscenes referencing the original appearances of the characters in their respective games. Fractured Daydream DLC 1 was just full-on visual novel format sadly, and I think we could have used at least a cutscene or 2, once for the introduction of the character and once at the end of the climax, you know, against Gleamice or something. Just a little one, 20-30 seconds, just to stand as a monument of the event, let's say. That would suffice. It just ended up being a bit disappointing not having any. What I found extremely weird is that they didn't even bother talking about who Strea is in the first place. 2-3 sentences, yes, in the first mission, with Kirito being surprised about having met on floor 76 and Leafa being caught off guard by Strea's mention of both her and Shinon being in SAO as well. But having a clean slate with Fractured Daydream taking place after the canon Alicization arc to, to be able to welcome all SAO fans who felt Gameverse was a little too long to get into at this point. That's an entirely different topic, but that was the main proposition of Fractured Daydream here. Not properly introducing or exploring Strea, it felt bad. It felt like a missing experience. Just from those early dialogues, we know for a fact that Kirito, Asuna, Leafa, Alice, Yui all have questions about Strea's existence and past, so not even attempting to address any of them really feels like a waste here. And looking from the player perspective, maybe they didn't want to be overwhelming for those who never played SAO games before, but then what should those players even make out of Strea? What value do they get from Strea? Practically, there are two options. One is that you assume everyone knows Strea, which we know isn't the case, solely based on the marketing of SAOFD to begin with. The other option, the second option, is that you know your audience does not know too much, if anything, about Strea in the first place, so you should introduce her properly, which you didn't do either. So what did you aim to do with the story in the first place? It just left me confused at the end of the day. Not even like the middle portion of the main game story, where they were very clearly referring to a lot of things with intentful dialogue, characters being aware of Yuki's death, Kirito, Klein and Age's situations post-order scale and cordial chords, the animosity between Yujo, Alice and Quinella and the like. They were very clever with their dialogue back in the main game, assuming players knew the basics, and even if they didn't, the game hinted enough things to, get them to know these characters. Here, in the Strea DLC, nothing. Those who know Strea, here you go, it's Strea, probably. Those who don't know Strea, hey, this is Strea, she likes hugs, that's all you need to know about her. Again, I am relieved that the story did not go with full Gameverse vibes, but I'm kinda let down that the story fundamentally did not have anything to begin with. The dungeon and the boss that are technically DLC 1 content, I got nothing to say. I just included this for structure purposes whenever I'll review DLC 2, because DLC 2 seems to be having more based on the Dengeki previews. The dungeon in DLC 1 was a full-on recolor of the original Gleam dungeon, and unlike EX raids, there wasn't even any alterations to the boss itself. The original Gleam Eyes and the Gleam Eyes Crimson, they are basically the exact same boss, just with a different element. As for Strea as a playable character, I have mained her quite a bit throughout Season 1 actually. She is in fact my highest level character alongside Leafa. I found her gameplay to be really fun, and that was before the buffs she got for Season 2. The way all her skill set is built around devastating charge attacks felt incredibly satisfying, especially against larger enemies. Her usual attack pattern consists of using her health drain ability first, which places a circle that applies health drain on attacks to every character inside the circle, not limited to your party, but the entire raid lobby. The longer you charge, the larger the circle becomes when you drop it. Then, depending on your circumstances, you'd either go for the charge slam for massive single target burst damage, or your spinny helicopter attack thing for AoE and sustained damage, the latter being particularly good at regening your HP when standing inside your own circle. But I know, charging takes a little too long, and sometimes it does not really pay off. Sometimes the boss just moves and your attacks are basically guaranteed to whiff, so having a build completely around the concept of charging can be a bit troublesome. And that was intentional because Strea is the only character who can not only move around as she is charging, but also can cancel out of a charge without a cooldown on the skill by simply dodging. And of course, to mitigate the length of the charging, her unique ability speeds up charge time significantly, where you can basically unleash a maximum tier charge attack within a single second. All things considered, I think she was a very well designed character, and from my perspective, she is very fun to play as in general. As for what I'd want from future DLCs to improve upon, I think my main expectation is clear here. Dive a little deeper into the characters. I don't think the stories themselves are bound to change in the short term. Oh, there's an anomaly, go check it out, defeat the boss, bring back data fragments so we can revive Nej at some point. That's been established, and until that narrative is done, we're gonna keep getting these DLCs from the looks of it. So just make the most out of the time instead. The side story between Fukajiro and Egil that was added with Season 2 free for all players is a great example, given references that people will recognize, creating new and memorable experiences with the spotlight characters, and solidly establishing the introduced characters for those who may not know them. Yes, it does go into M and Pitohui as well. And you know, those three, the recognizable references, new and memorable experiences, and properly establishing introduced characters, they are not separate from each other as bullet points. They should be the different outcomes of good writing based on the player themselves. You know, for an SAO veteran, a new memorable experience that derives from the story of these characters, and for the new players, that same story, that solid portrayal should be good enough to give those new players a good idea of who these characters are if they do not know them from beforehand. Additionally, I'd ask for a new original boss with each DLC, which wasn't as vital since the first DLC released immediately after the game launch anyways, but based on what we're seeing from DLC 2 with P2 and M, that wish may already have been fulfilled. The Fatal Scythe that you can face right now in free roam seems to actually be a DLC 2 boss, and that's great for expanding the overall game with new bosses every season in my opinion, so I really do hope that keeps up. Overall, positive impressions. If we get like one or two little actually animated cutscenes and feel a little bit more character, I think the story aspect will easily become perfect here. Granted, the expectation is not very high anyways, given the find the anomaly concept that's been established, but again, it's the characters and presentation that matter, and we're almost there. Also, hey Bandai, how about offering an SAO ticket, a single one, for S ranking all DLC stories in a given DLC. I think that would be a really nice treat for what is essentially a character pack add-on with some story attached. I'm sure it'll be a great gesture. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one. Until then, stay cool.